Hello, my good friends. Mike Shreeve here, founder and head troublemaker of the No Pants Project. You are listening to episode 33 of the No Pants Show. We're going to be talking about how to start a business when life still has to keep going, when you still have the day job to pay the bills, when you are trying to be a good spouse and a good parent to your kids, and maybe you're trying to take some classes on the side. You have community engagement, plus you need to take care of your health, and plus. How do you build something important when it's never as simple as I'll wait until I have time? Right? Because that's what a lot of people do. They say, well, when I have time, I'll work on my business. But you and I both know that time's never going to come. You have to make it. And it's never going to be perfect. We've talked about that many times on this podcast. Life is never perfect, so don't wait for that to happen because it's not gonna. But how do you not burn yourself out with everything else going on? Well, I want to share with you what I told one of my dear friends, who also happens to be a student of mine in the No Pants Project and in various other programs. I've known this individual for quite some time, and I have his permission to share this clip that I'm going to share with you. I want to give you some context, though, because it's very important that you understand specifically what it is that we're talking about. The problem with a lot of people when they try to build their business, they don't properly structure their business to take into consideration all elements of their life, of their situation, which pertain to protecting and taking care of the most important asset in their business. Here's a pop quiz. I've talked about this several times on the podcast in the past. What is the number one most important asset in your business if you're a freelancer or a service provider? The number one most important asset is you. You, the human being. So when you have a lot of things going on in your life, it's you, the business owner, who needs to take care of you, the asset. And you need to specifically design a business which takes all of that into consideration. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to give you background on here about my dear friend that we had this conversation with, who's you'll hear the clip here in a second. First thing is that this person had a day job, also had 30 years experience in real estate. That was his day job, but also wanted to do fiction. Sometimes you have to create a business that allows you to chip away at one thing at a time instead of trying to do 50 things at a time. So you'll hear me give that advice, and you'll understand why, even though this individual wants to do fiction and wants to do freelancing and wants to, and there's even a whole section of the audio which I didn't include in this where he wants to do speaking and things like that, you'll see why the path that I provided for him was not to try and attack all of those things at the same time, but to understand that all of those things have a time and a place, but the strategy that you implement should be a strategy of leverage, which is to say, let's look at the thing that's taking up the most of your time that you want to get rid of first. Well, that's your day job. Okay, well, how are we going to replace that day job? Well, we're going to replace it with XYZ, which you'll hear about here in a second. How are we going to replace that? How are we going to be able to set that up in a way where we are able to be successful and that it doesn't take forever, and et cetera, and et cetera. And then we can work on the fiction once we have that settled. Then we can work on the speaking once we have that settled. It's one thing at a time. I think a lot of people get it confused because I'm always talking about keep it simple, do one thing at a time, be focused, and at the same time they say, holy cow, Mike, but you do a podcast, you're doing social media now, you've got the No Pants Project. You've got a couple of offers in the No Pants Project. You've got your freelancing. You've got your fiction. You've got et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. And it can sound like I'm being a hypocrite. Well, I don't think I'm being a hypocrite, because the way that I do it, and this is the way that I recommend, is that you do one thing at a time until it's set and ready to go. Now, one of the things you'll notice, so for example, one of the things that you'll notice is I didn't really start doing social media and getting on the video and doing that kind of stuff until I had made this podcast a habit. Right? So it takes about 21 days to create a habit. I think I started doing my social media stuff around episode 23 of this podcast. There's a reason for that, because for the first 23 days, all I did was focus on the podcast and making it a habit. My fiction business didn't exist until I think it would have been 3 or 4 years after I started my freelance business, even though I knew I wanted to do fiction long before I ever started my freelance business. The No Pants Project didn't happen until 9 years after, well, 9 years after I started my freelance business, and then about 6 years after I started my fiction business. Now, you don't necessarily need to wait that long, right? And you'll see the advice that I give to my friend is, you don't necessarily need to wait years and years to get started on things. I just happen to do that because I'm terribly lazy. And, I'm one of those I don't like to rock the boat types. So, but I want you to understand and to take away from this podcast episode and what I'm going to be sharing with you is you can have a lot more than you probably A, think you can have, and B, think that I've ever said you could have, right? It's not about trying to plan for the next 20 years and say, I can only do this one thing for the next 20 years? That sounds horrible. First off, just look back on the last 5 years of your life. How different is today than what you thought it was going to be 5 years ago? I'm not the kind of person who is even going to attempt to predict 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. When I say focus, when I say, one thing at a time, simplify as much as possible, I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about taking the action now that will pay off in weeks, months, years ahead. I'm talking about one thing at a time until you can get it to where you want it to be, until you've got a handle on that thing, and then using that leverage. So leveraging the fact that you now have a business that more or less maintains itself and has become a habit without a lot of sort of stress and struggle and trying to get it going and trying to figure out it and et cetera, et cetera. So keep that in mind when you hear my advice to my friend, because it's important to contextualize. I'm not saying give up on your hobbies. I'm not saying ignore your kids. I'm not saying don't hang out with your wife. Don't pursue multiple business ideas. I'm just saying let's make a list of what needs to be dealt with first and deal with those things one at a time. It's much easier to deal with one thing at a time than 10 things at a time. Lastly, I want you to please take note of the price strategy that I recommend to my friend, and especially listen to why I recommend this price strategy and what the role price has in helping my friend wade through the fact that he has a day job. And specifically, take note and listen to the mistake he made in pricing and why that mistake he made in pricing made him reconsider starting a business altogether. Because I think sometimes when freelancers and service providers start their business and they have all this stuff going on in their life and they choose their price, they're not choosing the price that will sustain what they're trying to do. In other words, my friend, through his pricing, created a business that was actually physically impossible. In other words, the numbers would never, in this universe, with these natural laws, with only 24 hours a day, would never work. He would have had to have been like a superhuman who could somehow time warp and time travel and come over here and go and do 9 projects all at once. And sometimes freelancers make that mistake. The good news for my friend is a simple restructuring of his price now simplified his business to the point where he was like, oh my gosh, I see now how to get to where I want to go, and it's a lot easier than I thought. All right, my dear friends, so that is it. This podcast episode will end at the end of the recording, so it might be a little bit abrupt, but I don't really have anything to add other than listen very carefully and look at your own life, look at your own situation, look at the business and the decisions that you've made to see if you have made similar mistakes and what you can do to correct them. All right, my dear friends, here is the audio. Until next time, I will see you tomorrow. This is Mike Shreeve signing off. Hope you enjoy this clip. And made sure that you're charging, like you need to charge enough money to protect you, the asset in your business. So let me give you an example. At $75 an email, which I understand, like I've been there. I've been at the $25 an email level. Like that's when I very first started. So I totally get that desire to charge a little bit less. Yeah. But at $75 an email, let's do some math here. Okay, so let's say, and was that 75 US dollars that your Australian dollars that you were charging?
I'm talking Aussie, so you're probably talking 50 US. So.
Okay, so let's say 6,000 divided by 75. So you would need to write 80 emails, yep. Which is 4 emails a day, Monday through Friday, which isn't a lot.
No.
Except that you've got a day job. Now, all of a sudden, it becomes a ton.
Correct.
And you're trying to do this fiction thing.
Correct.
So now it becomes double as much.
Yep.
And each email requires, even the best clients, some admin. The admin of getting the client and the admin of managing the client.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising to me that your writing business, of all the things you've thought of doing, feels like something you don't want to do. It's not really surprising to me at all because the pricing structure you have in place has created an impossible pathway to $6,000 a month.
Right. Okay.
Like this is physically impossible to do a day job, to do your fiction, and to write 4 emails for clients.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So if we break down, okay, instead of doing 80, how many emails, how many blog posts, it doesn't matter where a blog post, email, whatever. Like at this point, let's just take whatever we can get.
Yeah.
But let's stay blog post and email. And let's think about, because clients will typically pay the same-ish for both. So whatever they'll pay for an email, they'll probably pay for a blog post. The cool thing about emails is they can be significantly shorter for the same price.
Yeah.
So let's say $6,000, and we want to work. We want to work 4 days a week. The reason we want to work 4 days a week is because 1, we need to rest, and 2, we don't want to just give up fiction, and 3, we just let's not work every single day. Okay, correct. So we have 16 days out of every month to make this happen.
Yeah.
So you need to be earning $375 a day, Monday through Thursday, or if you just want to do this on the weekends or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So $375. Now, there's a couple ways we could do this. We could say, all right, let's divide that by 3. Okay, so we're charging $125 an email. That's doable, but I would still say 375 divided by 2. I would go in charging $200 an email or $200 a blog post. And you may say, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot. But here's the thing, you got $75 and you're getting, what do you say, 100, 150 for your blog posts?
Yeah, I'm doing 150 for a blog post. So with that particular customer, it's basically 1 a week, do 4 a month, send him a bill for 600 at the end of the month. That's how it's, yeah.
So that customer, and who set that price? Did they set it or did you set it?
I said it.
Okay. That customer would have not noticed a $50 increase.
Yep.
But you would have noticed that $50 increase.
Yeah.
Specifically, psychologically, you would have been able to say, my price is now 200.
Yeah.
And when you set that price in your own mind, like clients aren't going to be able to tell the difference.
No, exactly.
It's all completely arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can write 2 blog posts per day, Monday through Thursday, remember, this isn't even 5 days a week. What you're essentially looking for is about 30 pieces. So if we do 30 pieces a month times $200, that's your 6,000.
Correct.
Now, how do we get 30 pieces a month? So the first thing I would recommend is hitting Fast Client Getting Workshop and taking on whatever writing you can get within those prices. Do not bend on those prices.
Yep.
Because right now, in your situation, taking on client work for less than $200 will only delay your ability to break out of the job.
To escape, correct.
That the 100%. It might feel like, well, hey, I'm making some money. No, you're not. You're losing money.
Yeah.
Unless you're making $200 per project.
Yeah.
Now, there's 2 ways to make this happen. One is focus only on real estate. Like, do you feel like you could write about it? Might not be your passion, but do you feel like it would be fairly easy for you to sit and write about real estate?
No, 100%. I've done it for 30 years. So
exactly. 30 years. You could probably
you're probably not even 30 years old.
You could bang out you could probably accomplish what we're saying would take 4 days. When you don't have your day job anymore, you could probably get all that work done in a day or 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. It was something that easy. Now, is it going to be fun? No. Are clients still going to give you feedback? Yeah. But we'll talk about what happens when you break free and why it will be worth it. Okay. So, Fast Client Getting Workshop and LinkedIn. It's going to be brutal. It's going to suck. It's not going to be fun, but it's also not going to take that long.
Yep.
So what's going to happen is you'll be doing honestly, I think for you, I'd almost recommend LinkedIn more than even the email. But test both, I guess.
This is through Fast Client Workshop. You use the go through the modules about using LinkedIn on there. Is that what you're saying to me?
Yeah. Yeah. So Fast Client Workshop. Now, what's going to happen is there's a couple of different ways you can pitch yourself. I would recommend being flexible and open and just taking what you can get, as long as it's for your price.
Yep.
One, of course, is you just get more blogging contracts like the one you have.
Yes.
Right? So once a week, $200. There's 800 a month. You've got 4 or 5 of those, plus the occasional one-offs. That's, that's pretty easy business, I would
Sure.
say.
Yeah.
There's also just doing emails for people, which tend to come in bundles. So most businesses that know what they're talking about don't order one email, right? They'll order 5 at a time, an autoresponder sequence or a launch sequence.
Yeah.
And so, 1 or 2 of those a month. But ultimately, here's what you're trying to do with Fast Client Getting Workshop. All you're trying to do with Fast Client Getting Workshop is to get your foot in the door as the writer for the company. It might start with a blog post a week, but if you constantly hound them, and I don't mean like too aggressively, but just a constant reminder that you're willing to write more of their stuff, eventually, if they like the things you're producing, they'll have you write other things. So let's say you get your foot in the door, a blog post a week, and then you just be like, hey, I saw the get on their email list and be like, hey, I saw this email that you wrote the other day. I was wondering, you want me to write those for you? That's simple. That's simple. Hey, I noticed that on your webpage it says this. I think that's probably turning people off. Do you want me to like rewrite this for you?
Yeah.
And if they're already paying you and they're liking what you're doing, another $200,000, $500,000 a month is not going to be a big deal for them. It'll be a big deal for you, but for them it won't be that big of a deal.
Yep.